to episode 4 of the Pursuit of Precision podcast. Today, we were blessed to interview Christian Hauser, one of the most successful and long-term construction lawyers in the state of Michigan. It was an absolute pleasure to sit alongside this man and hear his journey from where he started out to where he is now, and I can't wait to see how much you guys learn from this also. Let's head to that episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pursuit of Precision podcast. My name is Ryan Jaros, and over the next 12 months, I'm going to be interviewing 50 of the most successful, intelligent, and ultimately happy people that I can in order to hear their story and share with all of you guys what I learn along the way. Today, we have our guest, Christian Hauser.
Morning.
Thank you so much for being here and spending your time with us. We appreciate that greatly.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right, so we want to get into a little bit about who you are. I'm going to speak on you for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Hash off a couple of your accomplishments just to kind of let people know who you are. It's going to be seen in more than just Rochester and Michigan alone, so we want to let people know who you are and what you've done.
Sure.
So, Christian has practiced law for over 20 years now. He is now a partner as the head of his firm in construction law. He's a member of the American Arbitration Association panel of construction. He's a chairperson in the city of Rochester Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. He's a part of the Michigan Super Lawyers in construction litigation in 2017, in 2018, and 2019. In 2015, he was a leading lawyer. In 2013, he was a top lawyer in Metro Detroit in construction litigation. And this is from dBusiness magazine. In 2012, he was, again, one of the top lawyers in the Metro Detroit area in construction law and construction litigation. Again, dBusiness magazine. He has lectured for the University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan, and the American Institute of Architects. He volunteers his time with Hanson Brooks Distance Project and a number of different other ways that he contributes his time and services to the community. So, again, this is just a quick spark notes of what you've done and what you've accomplished, but would love to hear a little more in regards to what does your day look like now?
Sure.
What are you responsible for? Who comes to you? What does your day look like? Where are you allocating most of your time at this point?
Certainly. So my primary practice is as a construction lawyer. So what that means is I represent owners, general contractors, subcontractors, design professionals, meaning engineers, architects, and various other trade contractors for construction disputes. And it's a very specialized and niche practice because there's not a whole lot of us who do this particular type of law. And a general day for me consists of lots of different things. It could be reviewing contracts for large projects. It could be talking through issues that a particular contractor or subcontractor may be having at a particular job site, whether it's delays, whether it is lack of payment, whether it is change in scope, whether it is issues that they're having with constructability. So, for instance, if a contractor is supposed to build a particular building or install a particular system, a mechanical, electrical, or plumbing, and it's not working, the drawings are not consistent with what's being represented in the field, how do you work through those problems? And who's responsible? Is there an adjustment to the time? Is there an adjustment to the contract price? Maybe both. Okay, so those are kinds of things that we do on a regular basis. Similarly, I'm regularly in court. Okay, so to the extent the dispute goes beyond a telephone or an email, I have to sometimes initiate litigation or defend litigation against one of my clients. So I'm regularly in court arguing on behalf of a client, depending on the circumstance. And then a large part of my practice, Brian, has morphed into arbitration and mediation. Okay, and I can get into that a little bit if you'd like, but as you mentioned it, so there's an association called the American Arbitration Association. What that is, it's an alternative dispute resolution process that instead of going to court, you go to arbitration. You often hear the term arbitration for sports contracts. You know, when someone says, oh, they're going to go to arbitration to resolve their dispute. Essentially what that is it's a mechanism for people to resolve disputes outside of the traditional courthouse. So I sit as a judge, for lack of a better term, and make rulings and decisions, findings of fact, conclusions of law for disputes between parties. And it's focused exclusively on construction law, though. So you would not come to me if you had a situation where there was a divorce proceeding, or there was a tax law issue, or some type of personal injury car accident. Those are disputes that I don't typically handle. Rather, if you had a dispute regarding an owner, a contractor and a sub, or some variation thereof, you would come to me, and as an arbitrator, I would conduct a trial, and I would take testimony, I would review exhibits, I would make rulings on the law, and then I would issue a decision. And that decision is no different than a decision that would be issued by a judge in a court of law, and it's binding. Okay, you can't, it's not a recommendation, it's not an option. It's binding.
It's a decision.
It's a decision, exactly. So that's arbitration. Then I also serve regularly as a mediator. And the distinction between an arbitrator and a mediator is that mediation is non-binding. So
that's the difference between what you just referenced.
That's exactly right. So when someone says, oh, they're going to go to binding arbitration, it's actually redundant, okay? Because arbitration by definition is binding, okay? So mediation is different in that I'm trying to resolve a dispute between two or more parties. Sometimes I'll have 6 different parties that I'm trying to navigate a resolution because there's different cross claims and counterclaims, et cetera. And in that instance, one group will be in one room, one group will be in another room, and I will participate in what's called shuttle diplomacy. And I will go back and forth and tell the other side or tell the parties, hey, this is what they're saying. This is what their position is. How is it different, or what's in contrast with yours? And see if I can match the parties to get some common ground. Okay. And that's what I do regularly as well.
Got it. Okay. In regards to your practice, I don't know the infrastructure of law in any way, shape, or form. What does your responsibility look like there? Do you have a leadership role where there's other people that are working? I don't even know if it's for you or alongside you, or what does your role look like? And that's what I'm trying to paint a picture of who are you to the people that you work with and the people that are around you.
Sure. So I currently am a partner in a law firm in Troy, Michigan. Okay. And I've been a lawyer now 26 years. Okay. So I graduated in 97. So 26 years now as a lawyer. And as a partner, that means I have an ownership interest in the firm.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm partners with a few other fellows, and we all work together collaboratively to manage, oversee, and operate the firm on a day-to-day basis. Underneath us, we have what's called associates. And an associate is an attorney who is typically a little bit younger, maybe still learning a little bit about the law, doesn't necessarily have the book of business to be self-sufficient. So what they do is they come in, and as the partner, we generate revenue by bringing in clients. Yeah. We manage day-to-day operations. And then what we decide to do is say, okay, I'm going to work on these cases. Associate, I'm going to have you work on this either independently on your own, or you're going to be what's called second chair. And second chair would be someone who is kind of like my assistant, and I will have him or her do various tasks, research, writing, respond to some administrative tasks while I do more of the management with the client.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was wondering, and to me, that strikes me as similar to almost financial services. Is that, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a similar infrastructure in terms of, it seems like some people will build their team in the same way where they've got their own, they work within, a lot of times it's within Merrill or some of these bigger companies, but they'll have, again, the same thing, the team that's trying to learn and grow their book of business before they decide or are able to go out and do anything on their own.
That's exactly right. So one of the big misconceptions about law school is that when you graduate, take the bar exam and, eventually pass it, you come out knowing everything, how to practice law, and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Okay, so law school really teaches you about the laws, about the various, manners in which laws are applied, et cetera. But with respect to the actual practice of law, dealing with clients, billing, getting paid, going to court, where to stand, all those other basic parts of being a lawyer.
The doing it part.
Yeah. is not taught in law school.
Yeah.
So as a law student, you try and become a clerk. You try and get into a firm and kind of learn a little bit, but still, that's very limited. It's only until you graduate and become a lawyer and then work in a firm do you really get a basic understanding of how things are supposed to go. And the associate's job is to kind of, for lack of a better term, shadow the partner and learn as a mentor-mentee type situation and see how you navigate a case from start to finish, how you handle client relationships, how you handle interacting with the other lawyers, et cetera. So that's...
And the little intricacies that you said about where to stand, which is so funny to say, but it matters in a lot of situations.
It absolutely does. There's most courts have a little cheat sheet where they'll have, plaintiff lawyer, defendant's lawyer, but, those are things that you just pick up. And in case anyone's wondering, the plaintiff lawyer always stands closest to the jury box. So that's it. But every now and then you'll go to court and someone will be on the wrong side. And I'm just like, hey, mister, you're over there. So it doesn't happen too often, but every now and then it will.
No. Yeah, that's so cool to hear. Well, what I want to do is now we've created kind of the picture of where things are now. And what I'm getting at mostly is the fact that I'm sure that these people that are learning from you and are they're green, they're getting into it and learning their way. They're probably looking at you saying, just in awe of what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it makes it look so easy, and how you manage all the time and obligations that you have are probably highly extensive. And they look at that and they're like, wow, how in the world does he do all that, right? And so what I'm trying to do is I'd like to go back now to day one when you were that person.
Yeah.
You were that person that didn't have a clue of where to stand. And so I'd like to kind of paint a picture of what that looked like, because I think there's a lot of times people get detached from who you were in the past and where you came from and where you started at, and maybe just see where you're at now and just assume that it's always been that way. You've always known what you were doing. You've always had the success that you have now. You've always had things under control the way that you do. And so I want to kind of create some framework and paint a picture for those out there watching to show that this is where you were when you started and where things began for you.
Sure. Well, to remove any doubt whatsoever, this is a situation where I found myself in, not by any type of specific planning or, I knew at age 4 I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Just the opposite, candidly. So I grew up not too far from here, and I was a product of a very middle-class family, okay? And my parents, though, instilled in us that the most valuable thing that they could do for myself and my brothers was education, okay? Neither of my parents went to college. And it was emphasized time and time and time again that although we don't have the resources to do all of these other things, what we can do is put you in the best possible position to succeed academically. Yeah. And that's what they did. So I was very fortunate to go to some schools that were very academic, intense, and it allowed me to be challenged academically.
Yeah.
And I went to college, and when I went to college, candidly, Ryan, I did not have any clue about being a lawyer. And neither of my...
I think that's an important point to make, because I think a lot of people think that needs to be an epiphany moment where it just comes to them and they know what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And that's not the case for most people.
It's not. And kudos to them if it does. It's wonderful. I mean, I'll meet people from time to time who say, I've wanted to be a physician since, I could remember, or I want to be an accountant since, I saw something that was interesting because I like numbers. But for me, it was just the opposite. I had a very traditional college experience, and it was great. But what was happening is I was getting closer to the graduation time, and I remember very distinctly we had a family friend who was an attorney, and I was talking to him. It would have been the summer before my senior year of college. And at that time, I was working in construction in a family business. Okay, so that's really
that's interesting.
That's what I knew. So I knew construction. I would work in cement. That was my background. So we had a family business, and I would work in the summers and pour concrete. And I saw the lawyer, and I remember this guy who I had known for many, many years, but he had a nice car. He always seemed, like he was doing something exciting, and he would talk about his job. And I remember he was over for dinner one night over the summer, and he's like, you should think about being a lawyer. I was a business major in undergrad, so I was getting my business degree and a minor in communication. So I was thinking, I'll go work in some type of business capacity, but I didn't know what. And this was back in, I'm definitely dating myself, this would have been 1993. You might not have been born yet.
I'm not going to answer that.
So I remember going to the Sterling Heights Public Library on Dodge Park and doing research on law school, because there was no internet back then. There was, that's how you do it. So I remember going through all the books, and I learned that you had to take the LSAT to go to law school, and I had no idea what that was. And so I started doing some research, and I signed up to take the LSAT exam, which is the law school advanced test or application test. And I remember talking to some people saying, are you going to go and do these Kaplan classes? I had no idea what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I called them, and it was like $700. I'm like, that's like $7,000 to me back then. I didn't have any money. So I went to the library and got a book, how to take the LSAT, and I sat and took it, and I did quite well. I was very lucky. And then because of geography, economics, I ended up going to University of Detroit Law School. So I graduated in 1994, and then immediately that fall started in law school at U of D downtown. And when I was there, I quickly learned what kind of law I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be a divorce lawyer. I didn't want to be a slip and fall guy. And no criticism, it just wasn't my speed.
Yeah. Well, and it based on what you're telling us, it wasn't your background.
That's right.
What you knew is what you knew.
And so back in the day, there was in like the main hallway of the law school on the first floor, they had like a big, glass case, and they would post stuff up there. Again, this is pre-internet.
Yeah.
And they would have job listings for clerkships. And I remember seeing a job posting for a law firm that specialized in construction law. And I was like, I cannot believe this exists. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It was, honest to gosh, Ryan, just a complete random act. I just happened to be walking down the hall. I looked up there and I saw it. So I wrote the name down, I called them, and I sent them my stuff, and I met with them, and I got hired the next day based on my background and stuff.
Yeah.
And from there, I matriculated through law school, and then they ended up hiring me when I graduated law school, and I stayed there for 9 years, and it was fantastic. And this law firm just did construction law. That's all they did. And it really allowed me to do what I wanted to do. The thing that ultimately happened, though, is that I would get clients who would say, hey, Christian, I want to form a business, or we need a will.
So just additional on
work.
top of what they were already doing within construction. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Side jobs. Hey, I want to buy this building,
Well, and people were sick of probably going to 18 different lawyers for 18 different things.
That's precisely right.
And they trust you.
And so what would happen is I would say, hey, I don't do that, but call this guy, he can do it for you, et cetera. And I found that I was sending a lot of work out that I was not getting. I wasn't capturing that work.
Yeah.
So I had a buddy of mine who I went to law school with, who I was sending the stuff, and he called me up. He's like, why don't you just come work for us? You do what you do in your office down the hall, and then whatever you can't handle, we'll do. And that's ultimately where I ended up at my current law firm now. So what I do now is I handle all the construction work. But if a client comes to me and says, hey, Christian, my wife and I want to get a will, hey, perfect. My partner down the hall handles that. Go talk to him.
So you guys
we keep it all
contrast,
in-house.
yeah,
That's
with each other.
exactly right. And that's the key to a law firm success, because you want to capture as much work as you can without sending it out. Now, we don't take everything, because that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
But to the extent that we can do it, it's always better to keep it in, because you're keeping work within the four walls of your building.
Yeah. So we just jumped through a lot.
A lot. I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. That's okay. And we'll piece our way through it. So what I want to go back to is, and this is, I think it comes through your humbleness, is, we just chugged our way through here and we did this. Yeah. And so what I want to do, though, is more break down back when you had no clue what you were doing.
Yeah, that was this morning. Yes.
Yeah. So back when, like you said, you were getting started, trying to find a job, or let's go back even further than that. When you just began to say, okay, I'm gonna try this whole lawyer thing,
yeah,
or even think about it.
Right.
What in the world gave you the confidence? Because again, I think that maybe you look at that as just like, oh, I just started, I decided I might be a lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. That's a very serious career path to start heading down.
Sure.
And something that I don't think everybody would maybe have the confidence to just jump into. So what I want to get into is maybe what was something maybe in your past, or this could have been when you were a kid, that was your first big win, maybe, where you gained some confidence in, I can figure something out that's difficult, or I can challenge myself to do something that I don't know yet. Because at the end of the day, going into it, you had to, obviously with the way that you've had success, you had to have known to an extent that maybe, hey, I can figure this out, or I believe in myself to be able to make this happen. So what maybe started that, or what was your first thing that you can remember that gave you that confidence?
Sure. I think it was a few things, to be quite candid with you. And in no particular order, I would say it as follows, is unlike a lot of peers and colleagues and friends of mine, I didn't have any option to not succeed. I did not have a safety net in the sense that, oh, if I don't make this happen, or if this doesn't work, I can just go work at the family business, or my parents will take care of me, or I could live there forever. Now, I'm not saying that they would have kicked me out on the street, but there was an expectation of, hey, you're going to go forward, you're going to matriculate through, and ultimately you're going to take care of yourself. So that was number one, is I was like, I don't have an option. Plan B. Yeah. Okay, this is it. And by default, I need to make this happen. Another thing that, and this is a little bit more personal, I don't know how deep I want to, if I'm going,
whatever you're comfortable with.
When I was a senior in high school, my parents got divorced. And my dad, for all intents and purposes, just kind of left, okay? It was, my parents were not getting along for several years, and ultimately they just dissolved their marriage, and my dad left. So that was my mom and my two younger brothers, the four of us. And I did not have the resources at home to fall back on also to say, hey, here's a bunch of money, we're going to pay for this, we're going to pay for that. So I was self-funding college. I was self-funding law school because it wasn't available. We didn't have the money to do it. So I'm thinking, okay, this is on me. If I want to, every dollar I spend towards tuition, it's mine. So I felt the impact every month or every semester when I would have to go, do the tuition, et cetera. And I wanted to make the most out of that opportunity.
Yeah.
Number three would be that I knew where I came from, and I knew how hard my parents worked to put me in that spot, and I didn't want to let them down. That was another component of it. They were very supportive, and I didn't get the pressure from them, like, if you don't do this, we're going to be disappointed. But they were always very encouraging to me and my brothers as well, as, hey, you can do this. Number four would be that I was very fortunate to have a very good friend circle and peer circle. Okay. I mentioned the gentleman who was the family lawyer who he was probably the most instrumental in me succeeding through law school. So I will tell you, when I got into law school the first year, and I was like, I made a mistake. This was the worst decision of my life. I don't like it. I can't stand it. The people stink. They're all a bunch of, cocky, whatever it is. Just a bunch of gunners, and I was not into that. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what did I do? But you can't get out. I was not going to drop out. I wasn't going to walk out after first year. I just said, hey, you're in it. You better make the most of it, and you got to persevere and push through. Finally, and I didn't mention anything, I was very purpose-driven and motivated because I went to college, undergrad, for a track and cross-country scholarship. So I was very committed to athleticism, and I looked at that as regiment. I looked at that as purpose, in a sense of, hey, you got a goal. I want to do this. I got to get up. I got to go exercise. I got to run. And then I'm going to go to classes and all those things. So that played a part as well, too.
Yeah. So I think maybe in that situation, you skimmed over the fact that you said to you there was no other option. Mm-hmm. But let's look at this plainly.
Yeah. There
was another option.
There was.
You could be laying on the street somewhere right now.
Yeah. I could be working, behind a garbage truck. I could be doing something.
So my question to that is, why was that so important? Was it the fact that maybe you saw what your family was going through and said, I never want to have that for my family, or I see something different for my future? Because I think at the end of the day, maybe if you weren't thinking through this exactly in that moment, maybe you just decided, I want to have a different life for my family. And that was something that you envisioned for yourself in your future.
I think it's, I appreciated very much how fortunate I was to be in that position.
To have the opportunity to even go to,
to be in college. That's exactly right. And I look at it as I'm a firm believer in don't waste opportunity or talent. Okay. We all know people who were born into families who were very successful, had all the resources, and they turned out to be knuckleheads.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's because I think they were given everything. They weren't necessarily pushed a little bit to do certain things.
Yeah.
And they never learned how to be comfortable when they were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. And for me, it was about, hey, I've got one bite at this apple. If I don't succeed in college, if I don't do well, if I screw around and get bad grades, my ass is coming back to Sterling Heights, and I'm going to have to go back and pour concrete or work in some shop or do something. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I just knew that the opportunity was there to get out of that. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to capitalize on.
And so I guess I want to take this even further then, because not everybody is in that situation. Because I've heard this story a number of times where people did not have the best situation growing up, and so they want to get out of it. They want to have a different avenue. They want to look at things in a different way and create a different life for themselves. But what can people do that maybe don't have that situation? Maybe they are fortunate, because at the end of the day, you can't choose your upbringing, your parents, what happens, right? Yep. But what if you are very comfortable? Maybe you have a family business. Maybe you have a number of those things. Do you think it's just important to maybe, because at the end of the day, like I said, it seems like you could have created that situation in your head. Mm-hmm. You created that why does this matter to me? Why do I need to have a different life? Why do I want to have a different life? You created that yourself. Do you think that could be beneficial for someone that maybe isn't in a situation where it's life or death, but it's more so they need to envision for themselves what kind of life they want and why it matters to them?
I regularly deal with businesses and companies where it was started by an individual and their children are now stepping up and coming into the business. And the first challenge that people have is, does my child want to do what I did?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number one. Presuming they do, then it's about not necessarily just giving the keys to the child and say, hey, this is all yours, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It has to be more about, hey, this is what I've started. What can you do to continue the success? And more importantly, what can you do to expand the success? What would you change and make it your own?
Yeah.
Okay. Just because we've done it this way for 50 years doesn't mean that we have to do it for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Take what's good, take what's tried and true, but also make it a little bit of your own and bring some new ideas to the place. And I think, to me, that's the most important thing that you can do as a successor if you're going to step into that position, to say, okay, I appreciate, Dad or Mom, what you've done to get this business started, but I have a couple ideas and I want to implement those gradually in. So that would be my suggestion to someone who is in that particular spot.
Okay. Do you have an answer for maybe those that maybe aren't taking over a company, but I'm more trying to get at the comfortability, right? Because yours and a lot of other situations seem to come from a position of uncomfortability, right? They may have no money. They may have no other option, actually, like what you said. And that's kind of how you framed it in your mind. But what about the people that do? They have a million options and they do have comfortability at home. how do they get the same fire and drive to be able to create something special for themselves because of they might feel insecure or not really know what they have to offer to the world when mom and dad have done a lot of special things on their own, right?
Right.
How do you create your own identity? And
I think you have to be prepared to take some missteps, and you have to be prepared to find yourself in a situation with that what you wanted to do or what you thought you were going to do didn't work. And you have to just mentally tell yourself, okay, I took a swing, I missed. Here's why it didn't work. Let's see if I can improve on that to try again. I don't know if you can teach, I know you can teach confidence, but I also am a firm believer that there's got to be a little bit something inherent in you, in your own DNA that says, hey, yeah, I've got some uncertainties, but I'm going to do this and I can do it. And I think you rely on others to help you with that confidence, you know, whether it's at home, a spouse, your friends, or your other business partners, and say, hey, we can do this. We can make sure that, you know, what we're going to do is going to succeed. And if it doesn't, that doesn't mean the whole thing collapses, but rather we're going to do this and we're going to do it well. Another point that I would want to make is I think it helps if you are able to do something that you're passionate about. I know we hear that all the time, but it's true.
Tell us why. And you know what I'm saying? Because that's where I think people they hear the one-liner type of thing, do what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So why, in your opinion, is that so valuable?
Well, I think it's so valuable because work is hard, okay? If you want to be good at something, if you want to succeed, you gotta work hard, okay? And I don't care if it's a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, you're flipping burgers, whatever. If you want to be good at something, it's going to take time and effort, okay? And we all can agree that if you're doing something that you like to do or that you're interested in doing or you're engaged in, the work is a little bit more tolerable. I tell people regularly that when you first start off as a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, you have to take every client that comes in through your door, okay? Because you're hungry. You don't have anything. Yeah. And there's a lot of crazies who come in through that door, okay? And you find yourself working on cases that are like, oh my God, this is terrible. As you get a little bit older and you get some more success and you get some more confidence and experience, you're able to start doing what you want to do versus what you have to do. Yeah. And to me, that was the distinction and the turning point in my personal career, in that now I get to do, Ryan, whatever I want to do when I get up in the morning. Yeah. If I want to take this case, if I want to deal with this issue, if I want to call this person, it's because I chose to take that client on. No one forced it on me. And that is the best feeling in the world because I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Now, it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it less stressful, but it does make it more tolerable because it is a enormous amount of time that you put into this.
Yeah, and I think at the core of what you're saying, you're ultimately interested in getting better at that thing.
Yep.
So what you said is if you find something that you're passionate about, you actually have interest in getting better at it. So you're willing to sacrifice more, meaning time, energy, attention, to be able to find the solution to get better.
Right. And the other thing, too, is surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who share that same view. And I've learned this more later on in life than I did earlier. This is certainly something that I've picked up on, is that the practice of law, to me, is a very collaborative approach. Okay, the lawyer can know the law, the lawyer can know, how to handle and make certain arguments, but the factual issues, the background, that's all from the client. Okay, yeah. Lawyers are storytellers. I wasn't there when the car ran the red light and smashed into you. Yeah. I wasn't there when the shovel, broke and hit a gas line or something. You need to tell me what's going on. So we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to get along. And then I take what you tell me and then I merge it into the law and say, this is why my client's position is stronger than the other side's.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool the way that you've it's interesting how you can kind of piece things together looking back, and it's so hard to envision and see what's happening while it's happening.
Listen, I am where I am today, not just because of me. I mean, yes, I actually had to do the work, but this was a collaborative group effort from lots of people, family, spouse, business partners, my law partners, and I did not get here on my own. There's this invisible hand that I think definitely elevated and pushed me in the right direction, because at any time you can get off track, okay?
Yeah.
And listen, let's be candid. There are certainly days when I'm like, oh, I don't want to go in. I don't want to deal with this. I got, this guy on the other side who's a pain in my whatever. I just realize, though, that those days are few. They're not as great as they used to be, and it's much more tolerable.
Well, I think the grand perspective is what you're getting at, is you care in the grand scheme of things about what you do.
Yeah.
And so that you have a much higher tolerance for what you're willing to do, what you're willing to deal with. And so I think that might be important for those watching to find something that they actually care about progressing in or care about having a presence in, because you're going to be willing to do 10x the amount that if it was something that you don't care about, or it's not your vision, it's somebody else's vision. Right? You got to find what's important and valuable to yourself, and you're going to be more so be able to tolerate how difficult those times are, because regardless of what you choose, it's going to be difficult and hard no matter what.
Right. So that it's definitely a job where you get out of it what you put into it, and I love to see the result. I love to see how the client is served, and how we take something that we might not think is great, but we say, okay, let's see what we can do and play the cards we're dealt with and move on. And those are things that you just have to be able to be comfortable with your client and say, listen, your case stinks, okay? You don't have a good argument. You are going to lose. But how can we salvage this a little bit? How can we try and do the best that we can with what we've got? And that too is a big part of the job, is counseling the client to say, listen, you got yourself in a really bad situation. How do we extricate yourself? But more importantly, how do we make certain that you don't find yourself in this spot again? So a lot of it is educating the client on why you want a contract in writing, why you don't send the emails that you just sent, why you are careful about what you say, because those words can sometimes come back and be used against you.
100%.
Yep.
100%. All right. So I want to scale now through your career a little bit, right? Because I'm sure that there's been so many different phases that you've gone through. And so what I want to pick apart and kind of go through is what each phase was like for you and how you were able to surmount that. Because at the end of the day, you scaled to a great position where you're very happy doing what you're doing and managing a number of different people that look up to you and want to get to where you're at. So once you got your degree, day one, you get in your first day of work and you're just, I don't know if you're fetching coffee or what you're doing, but what were the emotions and the feelings like at that point in time when you were that guy? After
I took the partner's car to the car wash, I came back. I'm kidding. So it was, but it felt like that. I absolutely remember the first case I had, and it was a construction case, and I was given the matter by the partner, and it was for $13,000. That was the amount in dispute. Ryan, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I had graduated law school very early. I went through quickly. So
for reference, I want to bring something up.
Yeah.
What's the biggest one you've done now?
I have one right now. I have a trial starting on Monday. So this is Saturday morning. I've got a trial starting on Monday. That one's for $5.6 million that I've got going on right now. The largest one that I have had so far was $14 million. Okay.
So for reference, everybody that's watching, he's freaking out. Day one, over $13,000, and now he's doing situations dealing with $14 million.
And we just signed a contract. One of the contracts that we just did was for $336 million. That was a very large paint shop for one of the large automotive companies. So the millions and millions of dollars, like I don't even
monopoly money.
I don't even bat an eye anymore. And that's the contrast, because when I was graduating law school, I was 23, And I had this case for $13,000, Ryan. I don't think I slept for 4 days because I was so terrified of screwing this up, because to me,
it was your $13,000.
It was mine, and I didn't have $13,000. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I ruin this, I'm done. Yeah. And it worked out okay. And not to sound like a complete tool now, but if someone came to me with a case for $13,000, I wouldn't be able to handle it because it's too expensive. That would be something that I would have a very young associate, just like what happens here. You handle this. So I started off just like any young lawyer on very small cases, helping out.
What helped you get through those situations? I'm curious, just because, like you said, I mean, you were so terrified. What did you do actually? In terms of, was it you not sleeping and literally studying for nonstop and doing what it takes? Is that kind of the situation?
It was several things. One, it was just absolutely knowing the case up and down, left and right, every argument that we could make, okay, that was in defense or in support of a particular position. Number two is I had a very good support staff at the office, like the partner who was like, hey, it's okay. Don't lose your mind over this, and nothing bad is going to happen if you don't succeed. Those words of encouragement, which were very helpful.
So the support.
Yeah, it was not a situation where, hey, if you lose, you're fired.
Yeah. Because
no one should ever have to work in that kind of environment, okay? It was very supportive. Hey, here's what you're going to want to do. And they knew that this was a case that if we lost, big deal. The world is going to continue to spin on its axis, and the sun will rise tomorrow in the east. So that was not a big deal. And the client was also helpful because to them it was like, all right, it's not a big deal. So all those things contributed. But nevertheless, I still had to do the work. I still had to prepare. I still had to learn. And as you go through the $13,000 case, the $20,000, the $25,000, and then you get to the six figures, I started to learn that the dollar amount is just an amount.
Yeah.
What's important are the issues,
the situation, as looking at it non-emotionally.
Take the money out.
Yeah.
Take the dollars out and look at the facts and how they apply to the law. And that's when I started to feel a little bit more comfortable, because I'm like, well, wait a second. Don't focus on the economics. Focus on what the law says, because you're the lawyer, okay? Yeah. The money will sort itself out. But you don't even get to the dollars unless you figure out how the law works to this particular case. So once I made that shift in my mind, it became a little bit more manageable, because I'm like, okay, I understand the law. I understand what's going on. I don't have the money no matter what. So, and it's not like they're going to come after me if I don't, I don't have to reimburse these people. So that's what it was, Ryan. I began to focus on the facts and the issues versus the amount in controversy.
Well, and one thing I will say that it seems like it's already becoming a consistency for you, though, is the stories that you told yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless if it was getting started in school or getting started with your first case, you're telling yourself the story in your head of, I'm going to be fired if I don't do this perfect. And so, but I think it's valuable to note that, because at the end of the day, that is what inspired you or gave you the motivation to do the work that you did. Maybe you didn't sleep, maybe you didn't do whatever, but at the end of the day, it meant that much to you to make sure that you did a good job, that you terrified yourself, but through what the story that you told yourself to perform the way that you did.
The other thing that I found to be very important for those first 5 years of being a lawyer was to use your ears and mouth proportionately. Do more listening than talking, and listen to what others are saying, particularly those who are your managers or the partners. Watch how they handle a situation. Watch what they do. And one of the things that I've tried to do universally in life is similar to what you're doing. We know successful people. We know people who have done well for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
Learn from them. How did they get to where they are? What you're doing now is no different than what I do, okay? I see someone, a lawyer, I'm like, wow, that's a really good argument, or that person really knocked it out of the park. I can learn from that. We can all learn. And so it's a constant observation of skills, of experience to say, okay, I can improve on this. By no means do I think I have tapped out on my ability as a lawyer. I'm hoping it's still a continuing evolution.
Yeah.
But I would say that was probably the biggest thing that I did those first 5 years, was to really listen and to, give my input when it was asked. But I definitely was more in the second chair versus blurting out my thoughts. And then, Ryan, there really came a point in time when there's no demarcation point, frankly, but it just started to evolve where I started to feel a little bit more comfortable speaking up or giving my advice or interacting directly with the client, and being familiar. Hey, here's what we got to do. Here's what I need from you. And then that builds confidence. And once you get that confidence, everything kind of just falls into place, okay? And it's an evolution. It really, truly is, at least in my perspective.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's totally true. You've been able to stack what you've done over time, and it's very clear that you've done the work in order to get to where you are now. Mm-hmm. So what I'm curious about now is that transition piece from when you were just that guy sitting around listening, getting a couple cases here and there, to when was the first position of leadership that you got into where people were looking at you in that way? When did that transition happen?
I can tell you pretty much exactly when that happened. So when I graduated law school, I was working at that firm in Bloomfield Hills, and right around the 9-year mark that I was there, total, this would have been 2005, okay? And I started to feel like I was hitting the ceiling. Like I was, my room for expansion had kind of stalled.
Yeah.
And I started to look and say, okay, I'm either going to be in this spot and have a very good job and do all that, but I want more. And I met with my friend, who I went to law school with, and he was telling me, hey, come on over to this office. And I took that leap of faith. I really, truly did. I'm not I've had 2 law jobs in my entire life. In 26 years, I've worked in 2 law firms. And there's some lawyers who bounce around and go to, 16 different law firms, and that's fine. That's their gig. I did not want to be that person. I wanted to go somewhere and set up and be established. Mm-hmm. And so I left. And when I left that firm, I found that a lot of clients came with me. And that, to me, was the signal that they said, hey, I trust you. I want you to continue to be my lawyer when you go to this other firm, and we believe in you. And so, Ryan, that would be the answer to your question. It would have been in 2005 when I left that firm. And that point on, it was to the moon.
Yeah. I think what's so cool about that, too, and again, this is always, I love sitting in the chair here and hearing you verbalize your story to me, because I think I can kind of piece together how things happen more so than you were doing it and just kind of in the flow. But I think what you're not realizing is you looked at your purpose again. Mm-hmm. You looked at what was meaningful to you at that point in your life. And it was a transition at that point. It wasn't always that you were going to have the same purpose or the same, what got you out of bed when you first started your career was not the same thing that happened at that point. You said you were hitting the ceiling. You maybe weren't as excited about what you were doing, and you were ready for that next challenge. Yep. And so I think it's important to check in with yourself to make sure that that is something that you're feeling every single day.
And then after that, I remember, I think it would have been 2007-ish or so, I was hired to handle a case for a large construction job in Georgia, at the University of Georgia. And this went to trial. This went to federal trial. I was by myself. You know what I'm saying? I had never done a trial in federal court alone, let alone with anyone else. And we won. And we won a substantial sum of money. And Ryan, I would say after that case, because it was in Cranes, it was in all of these different construction periodicals.
What year did you say this was?
That would have been, I think, 2007-ish or so.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is 2 years after
2
you
years
would have
after I
made
left.
it. Yep.
Right when I left, I got this client, and then, because a case, a lot of people don't understand is 1% of cases go to trial. Okay, 1 to 2% of cases go to trial. The other 98% settle. Okay, so
that's an interesting stat.
Yeah, the majority of cases, particularly in my field, are often resolved informally, whether for settlement, mediation, or they're dismissed or whatever, but 1 or 2% go to trial. This ultimately went to federal court and trial down in Detroit, and we won a couple $1 million. And after that, Ryan, my career changed forever, because that was the catalyst for all of these new people to come in, and word of mouth and referrals. And after that, my life has never been the same.